The knock was heavy and intentional. It wasn't the kind of knock a neighbor gives. It was more like an announcement, a declaration of some invisible authority. I opened the front door and saw them, 3 people I barely knew but had seen enough times to recognize instantly. Gary, the HOA president, in his usual beige polo and clipboard. Deborah, the treasurer, who wore oversized sunglasses even though the sun hadn't crested the tree line yet. And behind them, a guy I didn't know, young, nervous, holding a phone and recording like he expected a fight. "You need to move the boat," Gary said, without any greeting. "It's blocking the view from the trail. It's not allowed." His eyes didn't ask, they demanded. But I didn't flinch, I didn't move. I just looked at the dock, my boat, my lake. I already knew this moment was coming. Ever since I bought the land last fall and quietly closed on the water rights, I'd been waiting for this day. But it still felt surreal. And if I don't, I asked calm even. I already knew the answer. Gary stepped forward. "Then we'll fine you. Every day. Until you comply. We've sent notices." "Oh, I saw them," I said. "Trash pickups on Tuesday. They're already gone." Deborah stepped in. "Look, sir, this isn't personal. We have rules for a reason." She motioned to the lake like it belonged to her HOA's sacred doctrine. "That dock is visible from the path. We maintain the trail around the lake, and you can't just park a boat like that. It disturbs the natural view." That was the moment I saw their arrogance. They thought they owned the place, thought their printed rules were stronger than deeds and legal filings. They had no clue, not even a hint. The young guy filming raised his phone higher, capturing my face. "We're documenting this for record," he mumbled. I smiled. "Fake, not angry, just real. That's fine. Record this too. The lake, the shoreline, the clubhouse at the far end, and all the trails around it. Because in 48 hours, I'll be fencing off half of it. And that fishing club you guys run on weekends." I pointed to the warn sign half a mile down the trail. "They'll be getting a cease and desist from my attorney." Silence. Gary blinked. "Excuse me." "You're excused," I said, stepping back inside. "Have your lawyer contact mine," and I shut the door. Hard. But the conversation was far from over. That was just the opening shot. They thought this was about a boat, but it was never about the boat. It was about power, territory, and how people act when they realize they never had control in the first place. Inside, I poured myself coffee, my hands calm, but my mind spinning. I'd prepared for pushback, sure, but I hadn't expected them to bring a camera crew to shame me on social media. Still, nothing they did would change the facts. 6 months ago, I'd quietly purchased not just the house at the edge of the development, but also the entire body of water that wrapped around it. The lake, legally, wasn't public. It wasn't even HOA controlled. The fishing club had leased access from the prior owner, but that lease expired the month I moved in. I'd given no notice, made no changes until now. The boat was intentional, a visible sign. A warning. By mid-morning, the local HOA Facebook group had exploded. Entitled "New Neighbor Blocks Trail View with Ugly Boat. Where's the board?" This is exactly why we need stronger enforcement. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I opened the email from my lawyer confirming that the cease and desist letters had gone out. One to the HOA, one to the fishing club president, one to the city to clarify the water rights, and one, just for effect, to the state conservation office highlighting some violations I'd observed during recent fishing tournaments. That one would sting. I didn't want a war, but they'd picked one, and now they'd see how deep the water really was. At 3:17 p.m., I heard shouting. I stepped onto my deck just in time to see 2 club members arguing with each other near the trailhead. One of them held a folded paper in his hand, shaking it angrily. The letter had landed. I watched as the argument turned physical. Someone shoved someone else. Then a truck roared in, tires crunching the gravel near the old clubhouse. The door slammed. A man in his 50s got out, gray beard, camo vest, baseball cap. I recognized him from a photo. Warren Collister, president of the fishing club. He stormed across the grass, ignoring the path, straight toward my property line. I walked out to meet him. No fear, just clarity. "You're trying to kill a tradition," he barked. "We've fished this lake since '96, since before your house even existed. Maybe you should have bought the lake then," I said. "That you don't get to just close the gates." He waved the letter in my face. "We built that dock. Our club built those benches. That's community property. That's your mistake," I said. "You improved land you didn't own. The lease expired. No one renewed it. It's over." He stared at me, jaw clenching. "We'll fight this. Legally. Go ahead. I'll wait." I turned and walked back up the hill. Let them rage. Let them panic. The real story wasn't about them. It was about what they'd done while no one was watching. And now that light was shining, the shadows had nowhere left to hide. By nightfall, my inbox had 5 threats and 3 passive-aggressive invitations to the next HOA meeting. The fishing club's Facebook page was flooded with dramatic posts, photos of smiling families on boats, kids catching bass, people painting benches around the lake like it was a national landmark. They were building a narrative, painting me as the villain, a rich outsider who moved in and decided to ruin a community tradition. But what they didn't post, what they wouldn't dare mention, was the quiet deals that had gone on for years. Cash-only fishing tournaments with unlicensed sponsors, local businesses dumping waste into the waterline after hours, and the fact that half the structures built on the shoreline weren't even permitted. I had photos, I had dates, I had reports, but I didn't post them, not yet. I let them spin their outrage. Because the more noise they made, the easier it would be to prove what came next wasn't retaliation, it was necessary enforcement. The next morning, the real shift began. 2 white trucks with county plates pulled up to the far end of the lake. Environmental enforcement. I watched from my upstairs window as officers in vests took water samples, photographed the shoreline, and marked 3 locations with bright orange stakes. When they left, they posted a laminated sign on the club's main dock: "Site under review, no public access." That was the first crack. By noon, my phone rang. It was Gary again, the HOA president. His voice was calm, too calm. "Hey, we were wondering if you'd be willing to discuss the whole lake situation. Maybe compromise." "Sure," I said. "Let's meet here tomorrow morning. Can we bring our attorney?" "I insist." When they arrived the next day, it wasn't 3 board members, this time it was 6. They brought coffee like it was a peace offering. They smiled politely, sat stiffly around my back porch table while pretending not to notice the lake shimmering. Behind me, I let the silence drag for a moment before speaking. "Let's be clear about something," I said. "You don't want compromise. You want me to pretend this never happened. You want the boat gone. You want the club back. You want the illusion of control restored." Gary's lawyer, a young guy in a navy suit who looked fresh out of law school, leaned forward. "There are certain community expectations, sir. You may own the lake, but that doesn't mean you can ignore the covenants." "Stop," I said. "I've read your CCNRS twice. The HOA governs the homes, not the water. Your documents never included lake rights because the developer couldn't sell what they didn't own. I own it now. That's not an opinion. That's a matter of public record." Deborah looked sick. She knew I was right. But the lawyer pressed on. "Even so, placing a docked boat in view of the community path that docks on my property," I said. "You want to talk visual nuisances? Let's talk about the illegal fire pit built near Lot 43, or the concrete runoff pipe behind the clubhouse that drains directly into my water, or the party you hosted last summer without any permits." Silence again. Then Gary, softening, asked, "What is it you want?" I stood, walked to the edge of the deck, pointed at the water. "Respect," I said, "for the land, for the law, and for the fact that just because you've done something for years doesn't mean you're entitled to do it forever." They didn't respond, because what could they say? The meeting ended with stiff handshakes and hollow promises to stay in touch, but I already knew what would happen next. They'd rally, they'd post more online, they'd try to smear me publicly, to pressure me privately, but none of it would matter, because tomorrow, the surveyors would arrive, and after that, the fence would begin. That evening, Warren from the fishing club came back, this time alone. No yelling, no swagger, just a quiet, tired man holding a cooler and 2 beers. He nodded at me like we were old friends, even though we weren't. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked. I motioned to the deck chair beside me. He opened the cooler, handed me a beer, and sighed. "I know we've had words," he said, "but I figured before lawyers burn everything down, maybe we talk like men." I took the beer, didn't sip it, just waited. "We started the club after a neighbor's kid drowned," he said. "We cleaned the water, stocked it ourselves, built docks so it'd be safer, turned it into something more than just runoff from a storm basin." I listened, let him have his moment. "I get it. You bought the land. You want to protect it, but it meant something to people, still does. I'm not trying to erase that," I said, "but you can't build community on unclaimed land and expect it to last forever. You needed a lease, permits, oversight. You had none of that." He nodded slowly. "You're right, but there's good in what we did too. Just ask around." I didn't respond, because part of me knew he wasn't wrong. They had cleaned it. They had cared for it. But care without law is just a favor, and favors don't last in court. "I can't let people fish here anymore," I said. "Not unless we build it back from scratch. Legally, clean, insured." He looked at the lake, his eyes distant. "Would you let us, if you do it right?" He didn't answer, but I saw something shift in his posture. Less anger, more understanding. He stood, tipped the empty beer bottle at me, and walked away into the dark. I watched the ripples on the lake for a long time after that. It was quiet, almost too quiet, but deep in my gut, I knew peace wouldn't last. Not with Gary still pulling strings, not with the HOA scrambling to save face. This wasn't just a property dispute anymore. This was personal, emotional, and people don't play fair when they're cornered. I checked my phone. 1 new voicemail. No caller ID. I played it on speaker. "You think you're smart. You think owning the lake makes you untouchable. Watch your back, waterboy. This isn't over." And just like that, things got serious. I listened to that voicemail twice. The voice was disguised, digitally altered, but it didn't sound like a prank. There was no laughter, no breathy teenage taunt, just a clipped, cold threat. I saved the recording, sent a copy to my lawyer, and filed a non-emergency police report. Not because I thought anything would happen tonight, but because when things unravel, it's always better to have a paper trail. People make bad decisions when pride is wounded, and Gary's pride had just taken a hit in front of his entire board. That night, I barely slept. Every car that slowed near my driveway sent adrenaline spiking through my chest. At 2:11 a.m., motion lights flared behind the garage. I grabbed the flashlight, stepped onto the deck, and scanned the tree line. Nothing. Maybe a raccoon. Maybe not. The next morning, the surveyors arrived in a red pickup. 2 men in vests with yellow tripods and clipboards. I walked them to the waterline and handed over the official plat maps. "We're confirming the eastern perimeter," I said. "Make sure everything inside this line is posted private. Fence installation begins Friday." One of them nodded. "Any expected disputes already started?" I said, "Just make it clean." They worked for hours, walking the property, planting fresh stakes, documenting coordinates. At one point, a neighbor from 3 houses down came out, arms crossed. "What's all this about?" he asked. "Just confirming boundaries," I said. "For fencing." His eyes widened. "You're fencing the lake." "My portion of it, yes. But the trail goes around, not legally. That's an easement on HOA property. This section crosses into mine." He didn't like that. "That's going to upset people. People have had years to do this right. No one did. Now it's my turn." He turned, muttering something about lawsuits. I didn't respond. Let them talk. Let them vent. They still thought outrage could bend law, but the law doesn't care how loud you scream. By the time the orange stakes ringed the eastern shoreline, the clubhouse looked like a relic of a forgotten time. Its siding peeled. The flag over the boat rack was faded and torn. That night, as I sat on my deck with a dog curled at my feet, a pickup pulled into the clubhouse lot, headlights off. 2 figures stepped out. No fishing gear, just flashlights and something long slung over one guy's shoulder. I watched them move along the shoreline, ducking behind the old canoe storage racks. I turned off my deck lights and waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. A sharp metal clank echoed across the water. I stood quietly, stepped inside, grabbed the scope from the closet and aimed it across the lake. 2 men, one holding a crowbar. They were trying to pry open the old dock's storage locker. Trespassing. Tampering with property. I snapped photos through the scope. Then I called the police. 2 adult males, possibly armed, near the east dock. No permission. Might be trying to remove or destroy stored equipment. The dispatcher was calm. "Officers en route. Do not engage." I stayed hidden, watching. 15 minutes later, red and blue lights pierced the night. A cruiser skidded into the gravel lot. The 2 men ran. One disappeared into the trees. The other tripped, face first into the water, and was pulled out moments later by 2 deputies. I recognized him immediately. He was on the HOA welcome committee. His name was Drew, 37, ex-military, worked construction, always wore that smug smile at board meetings. But not tonight. He looked like a soaked animal, pathetic and shivering. As the deputies cuffed him and walked him toward the cruiser, I heard him scream, "It's our lake. We built it. He doesn't deserve it." But the officers didn't respond. They'd seen this before. Pride dressed up as patriotism, entitlement wrapped in nostalgia. I gave my statement, handed over the photos, and declined to press charges for now. Let them know I saw it. Let them know I could have buried him, but didn't. That was more powerful than court. The next morning, the HOA president called again. This time, no clipboard, no fake politeness. "What are you trying to prove?" he asked. "That the law, it applies to everyone," I replied. "Even you." "We're filing an injunction," he said. "You're threatening our community." "You're welcome to try," I said. "Just make sure your clubhouse permits are in order." I forwarded everything to the city's compliance office. Silence. Then a low growl. "You've made a lot of enemies. Only the ones who thought they were above the rules." I hung up. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, it was inevitability. This wasn't personal for me. Not yet, but I could feel it getting there. On Friday, the fence crew arrived. Trucks, tools, workers in hard hats. Within hours, metal posts began rising from the ground, marking the new boundary between entitlement and ownership. People gathered along the trail, watching. Whispers turned into arguments. Some shouted. One elderly woman walked right up to the workers and screamed, "This was for our grandchildren." A crewman politely pointed her to the sidewalk. By sunset, the gate was installed. Padlocked, a sign bolted into the steel frame read, "Private property trespassers will be prosecuted." That evening, Warren returned. No beer this time, just a quiet face and tired eyes. "It's really done." "Huh," he said. I nodded. "We tried to meet in the middle. No one came halfway." He looked at the fence. "It was supposed to be a place people came together. Now it can be again," I said, "but by the book. No shortcuts, no secrets." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. "You ever think maybe you could have handled it different?" "Every day," I said. "But I gave people a chance. They chose war." Warren looked at me one last time, then turned and walked back down the trail. 3 days later I received a letter certified from the HOA's legal team. The subject line, emergency meeting, petition for immediate reversal of fencing and property access limits. Inside was a list of signatures, quotes from angry homeowners, and threats of collective action. I smiled. They were still fighting the wrong battle. They thought they were defending a lake, but what they were really defending was the myth that they'd ever owned it at all, and that myth had just drowned. The letter sat on my desk like a landmine. 17 pages, stapled, annotated, and written in the kind of stiff legalese that's designed to intimidate. Petition for reversal of private fencing and restoration of community access. They'd mailed copies to the mayor's office, the city planning board, the environmental agency, and even the local newspaper. It wasn't just about access anymore. They were trying to smear me publicly, paint me as the villain who tore apart their peaceful lake community. I flipped to the signature pages, 63 names. A few I recognized. Most I didn't. That's what hit me hardest. Neighbors I hadn't even spoken to had signed off on legal action against me. And yet, as I scanned each name, I noticed something. None of them were property owners directly bordering the lake. Not one. They were outsiders to the shoreline people who'd walked the trails or fished the banks or taken photos at sunset and convinced themselves they had a right to it. But rights don't come from memory. They come from deeds. And mine was ironclad. My lawyer Alison called first thing Monday morning. "Let me guess," she said. "You've read the petition?" "Twice," I replied. "Is there any weight to it legally?" "No, they're conflating tradition with easement. There's no legal precedent here. But politically," she paused. "This could get loud." "Let them be loud," I said. "As long as they stay off my land." She hesitated. "There's something else. One of my interns did a background scan on the HOA's non-profit registration. Turns out their fishing club fund, it's never been reported." "For 10 years, I sat up. "What does that mean?" "It means they've been collecting donations, running tournaments, even selling bait and rentals on land they didn't own without declaring revenue. If we wanted to, we could bury them," I finished. "Quickly, but it'll get messy," she warned. "You'll be seen as the guy who killed a community program. They declared war," I said. "I'm just reading the terms of surrender." That afternoon, I took a walk along the fence line. It was quiet, eerily so. No joggers, no families, just wind and birdsong and the occasional splash of water against rock. A stark contrast to the chaos online. The HOA forum had gone nuclear. "He's destroying our neighborhood," one post read. "We should have vetted this guy before he moved in," another said. But the real kicker came from Deborah, the treasurer. She posted a screenshot of the petition and added, "This is just the beginning. He doesn't own the community. We do." That night I received an anonymous package, no return label. Inside was a single envelope and a note. The envelope was unsealed. Inside it, photos, dozens of them, some old, some new. Fishing club events, cash changing hands, coolers stuffed with drinks labeled, sponsored by Big Billy's Bait Shack. None of it declared. And the note. It was typed. Simple. 4 words. "Check your boundaries again." I spread the photos across the kitchen table and studied each one. Something felt off. Too detailed. Too targeted. Whoever sent them wasn't just a concerned neighbor. There was someone on the inside. Someone close to the HOA. Someone who wanted the whole thing to burn, but didn't want to light the match themselves. I took the envelope and photos to Alison the next morning. "This anonymous?" she asked completely. She sifted through them, eyebrows raising with each print. "This is enough to trigger an audit." "Do it," I said. Quietly, she looked at me. "Are you ready for that storm?" They petitioned the city. They made it public. All I'm doing is giving the city something to consider. At noon, I got a knock on the door. Not heavy like Gary's. Lighter, cautious. I opened it and found Deborah standing there, visibly shaken. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. No words, just motioned her in. She didn't sit, just hovered near the living room like a student called into the principal's office. "I didn't know," she said, "about the donations, about the permits. I thought it was all handled." "Then why sign the petition?" I asked because I was afraid. "Gary said if we didn't unify, we'd lose everything. He said you were dangerous, that you were coming for the whole board." "I'm coming for the truth," I said. "And right now, that truth doesn't look good." She nodded, her eyes glossing. "Can I show you something?" she asked. I followed her outside, down the path toward the old clubhouse. We ducked around the side, past the faded picnic area, to a rusted maintenance door half hidden by shrubs. She pulled out a key. "This used to be storage," she said, "but a few years ago, Gary started using it for other things." Inside, the room smelled of mildew and gasoline. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, fishing gear, tackle bins, and at the far end, a filing cabinet. She opened the bottom drawer. Folders, dozens, donation logs, cash receipts, sponsor forms, none of it declared. None of it ever submitted to the IRS or HOA accounting. "He kept this locked," she whispered. "Told us it was just old junk." "How long has this been going on?" I asked. "Since before I joined. Probably longer." I photographed everything, every file, every receipt. When I finished, I turned to her. "You know what this means, right?" "Yeah," she said. "It means the lake isn't the scandal. Gary is." The next 72 hours moved like a fuse burning toward dynamite. My lawyer submitted the documentation to the city's Finance and Ethics Board. Deborah, shaken but resolute, offered a sworn statement. Everything Gary had buried in that musty little room was now copied, scanned, and sitting in 3 separate government inboxes. And yet, the neighborhood stayed calm on the surface. No one knew a bomb had been planted beneath their community's leadership yet. I stayed silent online, let the story spread on its own. But the fishing club's page went dark. No posts, no pictures, no fundraiser invites, just gone. They were circling wagons. And for once, I was glad I wasn't inside the circle at 8:42 a.m. on Thursday. A plain white SUV parked outside the clubhouse. 3 people got out, 2 men in suits, 1 woman with a city badge clipped to her jacket, auditors, official ones. I watched from the edge of my property as they entered through the front, clipboard in hand, camera slung across one shoulder. 15 minutes later, a police cruiser joined them. Not lights and sirens, just calm, procedural backup. That's when I knew things were worse than expected. They were preparing for resistance. By 10 a.m., Gary was on my porch. No clipboard, no sunglasses, no smug confidence. Just sweat on his collar and a folder under his arm. "We need to talk," he said, out of breath like he'd run the whole way. I stepped out, closed the door behind me. "I figured you might show up." He didn't make small talk. "What do you want? Is it money? Control of the HOA? What's your endgame here?" I almost laughed. "My endgame was peace and privacy. You're the one who declared war over a boat." His eyes twitched. "You don't understand what this place means to people. The club, the trails." "I understand exactly," I said. "That's why I didn't press charges when one of your guys broke into the dock. But now, with that storage room, the unreported money, you built a kingdom on sand." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've made enemies. People are angry. If this blows up, they'll blame you." "I didn't start this," I said, stepping forward too, "but I'm sure as hell going to finish it." He blinked hard, jaw clenching, then turned and walked off without another word. That evening, HOA Board Vice President Ellen Torres called an emergency vote. 5 members, no cameras, no public minutes. Just a quiet meeting inside the clubhouse while the rest of the neighborhood grilled burgers and posted lakefront selfies. I knew because Deborah told me. "He's losing support," she texted. "They want a vote of no confidence. But Gary's threatening lawsuits if they oust him." "Let them vote," I replied. "Just make sure it's recorded." At 9:31 p.m., I got the message, 322. Gary removed as HOA president. Internal investigation pending. That should have been the turning point, but instead, it lit the match. The next morning, the fishing club sign was gone, ripped down, sawn through and dumped near the clubhouse like a warning. Spray painted across the fence line were 3 words: "This isn't over." My camera caught the act around 2:14 a.m., a single figure, hoodie, gloves, bolt cutters. They didn't break in, but they got close, too close. I turned in the footage to police. No arrests. Just another report. Another reminder that wounded egos are dangerous. Deborah called again that afternoon. Her voice shook. "They're blaming me for leaking, for flipping. I've gotten 4 anonymous texts. One of them had my daughter's school schedule." I paused. "Come to my place. Bring your family. Now." She hesitated. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. They crossed a line. You're not safe there anymore." That night, her husband parked their SUV in my driveway and carried in 2 duffel bags. She followed with her daughter, a quiet teenager holding a stuffed dog like she was 6 again. I gave them the guest room and set every motion light on high alert. At midnight, I received a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was short, male voice, no disguise this time. "You want war, you've got it. 5words.com/controlled. But behind that calm was desperation. At 3:22 a.m., someone cut power to my security system just for 90 seconds, long enough to trigger an alert. When the backup battery kicked in, the feed restored and caught a figure running through the woods behind the house. I sent the footage to the police. This time, they responded fast. 2 cruisers arrived within minutes. One officer walked the tree line while another asked for access to the camera footage. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But the message was clear. They were watching, and they wanted me to know it. The following morning, my lawyer called. City's ethics office just issued an emergency review. They want Gary's financials, all 10 years of club transactions. "What happens if he refuses?" I asked. "They can subpoena bank records, freeze accounts, pull HOA's nonprofit status." I leaned back in the chair. "He won't go quietly." "I know," she said. "That's why we're filing a protective order for you. For Deborah, for anyone else helping this case." I hung up, looked out at the lake home, untouched, peaceful. It didn't reflect the storm building beneath. A storm made of paper trails, digital footprints, secrets whispered in clubhouse basements. And I realized I didn't just own the lake anymore. I owned the story. And when the truth hit the surface, the splash would drown every lie they ever told. By sunrise, the clubhouse was locked and taped. A thin yellow line across the front read "Temporarily closed, city audit in progress." The fishing club's Facebook group was deleted entirely. No archive, no history, just gone. The cleanup had started not by me, but by them. Gary had gone silent. No statements, no interviews. Not even a Facebook comment. It was the quiet of a man trapped in a corner, calculating his last play, and I knew he had one left. Someone like Gary doesn't just walk away. He waits for leverage. A mistake, a crack, something to twist back into power. What he didn't know was that every option left to him only dug him deeper. That afternoon, 2 men from the city's building inspection department arrived unannounced. One wore a GoPro strapped to his chest. The other carried a clipboard longer than my arm. We're verifying structural integrity of the fishing docks, shore benches, and clubhouse patio, the lead inspector said. There's suspicion of unpermitted alterations. You're going to find a lot, I said, and they did. Rotting supports, untreated lumber extensions, a hidden electrical line running from the clubhouse down to a freezer shack with no grounding wire. All of it built without permits. All of it dangerous. I handed over copies of the aerial photos I'd taken last month from my drone. The inspector took one look and muttered, "This is going to get ugly fast." At 6:07 p.m., a black sedan pulled into my driveway. Not fast, not slow, intentional. Inside was a man in his 60s, clean-shaven, sharp suit, eyes that didn't blink. "Mr. Carter?" he asked. I nodded. "My name's Roland. I represent the Homeowners Association Legal Fund. I was asked to offer you a resolution before things escalate." "Things already escalated," I said. "I've got 2 families hiding in my house because of threats made by your board." He ignored it, reached into a leather folder. "If you agree to remove the fence and allow limited public access to the lake supervised." Of course the HOA is prepared to drop all complaints and issue a formal apology. I raised an eyebrow. "You came here to offer peace terms like this is a war zone." "Because it is," he said. "You're winning, yes. But at what cost? You're alienating your neighbors, risking retribution, and damaging community property. Values. You think I care about resale price?" I asked. "I didn't buy this lake to flip it. I bought it to protect it." He slid the paper forward. "You have until tomorrow night." Then he stood and left. No handshake, no smile. Just gone. I didn't even look at the offer. I burned it in my fire pit. That night, it happened. Gary made his move. At exactly 1:03 a.m., my emergency cam pinged a motion alert. A figure stepped into frame, carrying what looked like a gas can. My heart jumped. The person crouched beside the dock, the same dock I'd rebuilt after the last storm began. Dousing the base, I didn't hesitate. I hit the panic button that sent a direct feed to local police and lit the floodlights. The figure froze, looked up, and bolted, not back into the woods toward the clubhouse. But he didn't make it far. A cruiser was already rounding the bend. Caught him 10 seconds later at the edge of the gravel lot. I watched from the deck, breath frozen, as they cuffed him. Gary, no hood, no disguise, just a gas can in one hand, and a half-smoked cigarette in the other. He didn't resist, didn't argue. Just sat in the back of the cruiser, staring at the lake like it had betrayed him. When the officer came to speak with me, he didn't sugarcoat it. We found matches in his pocket. "We're booking him for attempted arson and trespassing. He's done, Mr. Carter." News spread fast. By morning, every neighborhood group chat was flooded with the headline, "HOA President Arrested in Alleged Arson Attempt." Deborah's phone rang for hours. People apologized. Some cried, others tried to explain away the petition. Their silence, their votes. But it was too late. They weren't guilty by mistake, they were guilty by convenience. Gary just happened to be the one who got caught holding the gas can. Later that week, the city convened a public hearing, not about the lake, about the HOA itself. Turns out multiple violations had piled up under Gary's tenure. Falsified records, misuse of dues, improper elections. The fishing club wasn't just a cover, it was the spine of an entire shadow system. By Friday, the HOA board was dissolved pending re-election. The clubhouse was closed indefinitely, and the lake officially designated private by city records. Protected under environmental review. No fishing, no trails, no trespassing, and no more war. Deborah and her family moved out 2 weeks later. Too many stares, too many whispered threats. I offered to buy their home outright above market. She refused politely. "We just want peace," she said. "You deserve that too." As summer faded into fall, the lake grew still again. No kids, no club, just the occasional heron stalking minnows in the reeds. Sometimes I'd sit on the dock with a cup of coffee and listen to the water lap against the pilings I rebuilt myself. Not because I had to, because I could. People say I ruined a community. Maybe they're right. But the truth is, I didn't ruin it. I revealed it, showed what it really was. And in the end, I didn't just own the lake. I owned every lie that sank with it.